Welcome to another episode of Four Guys Talking About AI. Today we got three guys. We got my buddies Greg Sterling and John Gerard. Neil is in New York and not available today. But how's it going, guys?
Pretty good. How are you, Andy?
Doing great. Another big week in the world of AI. Today's episode is about how fast the AI landscape is shifting and how even the biggest players are struggling to keep up. On one side, we're seeing tools like Claude Code explode in popularity, pushing AI beyond what agents are actually able to do these days, and agents that they're able to build. Demand is so intense that Anthropic is now throttling usage after outages, which just tells you how quickly this wave is scaling. And at the same time, OpenAI is making a dramatic pivot. They just shut down Sora, their high-profile AI video product, killing a massive Disney partnership in the process. Is a billion-dollar deal after realizing that the economics and the compute demands didn't make sense long term. But the twist in all of this is that while they're cutting products like Sora, they're also printing revenue. OpenAI's new ads ad business is already crossed the $100 million mark in annualized revenue in under 2 months, signaling that AI isn't just a product anymore, it's becoming a full-blown monetized platform. So today we're talking about three big shifts that are happening all at once. AI tools getting so powerful that they're breaking infrastructure, AI companies rapidly pivoting their strategy in real time, and the business model of AI is starting to reveal itself. So let's get into it. Services like Claude Code are exploding in popularity, and a number of the things that you can do with these kinds of tools. John, you wanna lead off with this one?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So this is maybe an unorthodox observation. I mean, we all know that Claude Code has changed the way that developers develop. What I think is not being talked about quite as much as some of the other not strictly development related use cases that are just as or maybe more powerful. So this requires a tiny bit of a background on the entrepreneurial world. You all have probably heard of MVPs, minimum viable products. The reason that this whole idea of an MVP exists is because entrepreneurs learned the hard way quite a long time ago that just having an idea and writing it down on paper doesn't really get you anywhere. There are so many things that happen when you build a product and you think through what it might look like that you just can't figure out until you actually get it in the hands of people who might be using it. So this whole idea of an MVP, you need something that you can actually touch and feel and work with to give your idea enough structure so you can figure out, is it actually going to work, right? A lot of times, a term of art that's become used in entrepreneurship is you create artifacts. An artifact is something that isn't just a list of what this thing is. It's some kind of rendering of it. It's a wireframe or a mock-up or, like a landing page design that you can touch, look at, feel what the experience might be like. So AI is fantastically good at creating this stuff. And it used to be the case, 2 years ago, that if you were going to explore an idea and create some artifacts to try on your idea, you had to devote real time and resources and energy to it and make a decision. I'm going to spend my team's resources for the next 2 weeks on these 4 ideas and to explore what they might look like and feel like. Well, now you can explore those 4 ideas in 10 minutes in Claude Code, and you can have 100 of them done in an afternoon. So this idea of being able to iterate through and to try on possible futures for your startup in the form of what this thing might look like, feel like, act like if I were to build it is extraordinary. And I think we're starting to see some tools orient themselves around this. And I think we're starting to see entrepreneurs orient themselves around this really, really quickly. I also think it may be one of the root causes of this fail fast. Even things like Sora that are doing pretty well, let's shut it down because there's this belief that we can figure out the next thing, 100 times, 1,000 times faster than we were able to do before.
I think one of the reasons why OpenAI was saying that they're shutting down Sora is because they see the enterprise opportunity opening up so much, and they're seeing Anthropic, Claude, go after it, and they're feeling that they're missing out a little bit on that because they're really more at the consumer level, and we're starting to see some maturity in the marketplace where there's a little bit of that split happening, and OpenAI is saying, hey, wait a second, we don't want to miss out on that enterprise business. That's where the money is. And as evidenced in their advertising play, just making $100 million in 2 months in just right when they released their ad platform is indicative of what the table stakes are for or what the opportunity size is for these enterprise dollars. So being able to create agents in a way that we're seeing with Claude Code is really compelling. A few things about Claude Code just to kind of level set. It sounds very technical. It sounds like, oh, it's code. I'm not a developer. One of the most interesting things for me in just the past few weeks here is I've been digging into Claude Code myself. I'm not a developer, but I am a product guy, and I love products, and I love the way that like kind of breaking out the customer experience. What is that user experience, and how can you make it great? And what I found is that when you chat with Claude, let's say, and you start riffing in on an idea and getting to your MVP and getting to what you're talking about, John, with the artifacts. One of the artifacts that I found most compelling is creating a PRD. It's a product requirements document that basically says, I want to chat with you. I want to break out this idea. I want you to help me flesh it out. And then what I want you to do is I want you to take all of these ideas and I want you to put it into a structured document, a product requirements document. And that becomes like the basis of what you create your product on. And things like that, I think are really helpful to simplify the Claude Code part of this from actually just saying, I have an idea. I want to go to this minimum viable product within a short period of time, like you just mentioned. That to me has been an unlock to create that product requirements document and go, okay, great. Now I've got, and it's actually pretty fascinating. The level of detail that you get with these product requirements documents are, maybe 20 pages long. I mean, they can be significant if the idea is a big one. And then taking that product requirements document and then feeding it back in to now start creating the product itself. That all is a really helpful cycle to be able to get to the artifacts that you're talking about to really get to that minimum viable product. It's a game changing time right now.
One of the questions I have is as these things, I mean, I have two reactions. I've been playing around a little bit with Lovable and Base 44 kind of similarly. And and I wonder, I'm not a developer by any stretch or even, a product person really, but I wonder to what extent these outputs are going to be similar to one another. That there's a way that the whole system may standardize certain things, and thus the products may have bear similarities to one another because they're coming out of the same system. I wonder about that. And then I also wonder about the degree to which, I mean, I think I saw an article, unfortunately, it's not in front of me, about how there just have been all these apps, AI created apps submitted to the App Store,
Yeah.
and which is lengthening the approval process because there's just a real backlog. So the friction around, I tried to get an app built with a bunch of Ukrainian developers, and I spent about $30,000 of my own money on it. And, in the end, it was just a kind of a prototype, and I wish that I had waited 6 months and done something like this. But anyway, but I just wondered to what extent you're just gonna have an enormous amount of noise and garbage spit out because you can't, because people can develop things so quickly now.
The AI slop aspect of that is real for sure. I think, John, you mentioned this a while back, and it really resonates. We're in a shift right now where you're going from a SaaS kind of environment where you flex your workflows to a SaaS piece of software because that's the way it's developed. Where that now is being flipped, where you can now create custom software that fits within your workflow, and that in and of itself is very different. And I think when you apply that concept to whether it's small to medium sized businesses or enterprise businesses, and being able to create those kinds of solutions, that slop goes away. If you're creating consumer apps or those kinds of things, I can see how you're going to have a million fitness apps overnight and that kind of thing, weight loss apps and all those types of things. But when you focus more on creating bespoke business related apps that really service a need for a business, that is what Anthropic and OpenAI are going after. They're really digging into that, and that's what you're seeing with Claude Code, for example, is this explosion in a library of skills. Claude Code references skills, so you can add skills into a library, and then instantly Claude learns that, right? And so it can apply those skills to whatever it's doing. That in and of itself is it's almost like taking an app, like a full blown app or a concept of something, and just dropping it right in, and I've just added that to its brain and capability. So those kinds of things are a big unlock for this kind of enterprise or bespoke software environment.
I mean, I think that represents kind of radical change in the market and the way that people use tools and software, except my question really there is how accessible will all that be for regular small business or regular people, right? So the accountant, the small company, the small appliance repair shop that wants to do more with its own data, doesn't want to have a bunch of SaaS subscriptions. Things have to sort of get to a certain threshold of simplicity, and then there can be an explosion. Otherwise, you have a developer class or a sophisticated technical class that has to mediate, you know, between an intermediary who can translate the technology into the custom use case.
Which will happen for sure, and that'll continue to happen because this technology is continuing to advance so quickly. You're gonna need to have some kind of interpreter or somebody who can harness the technology to create solutions for you, or if you're just so mechanically inclined to just get in there yourself, it's becoming a lot more, accessible, if you have those skills. But because it's going from this paradigm where you buy this off-the-shelf software and then you have to figure it out, and you know how it is, like a lot of how many businesses are out there who buy HubSpot, for example, and they've got this Ferrari that's like sitting in the parking lot, right? And
Yeah,
they're using 5% of the functionality in there.
right.
Happens all the time. So this really changes that dynamic quite a bit, and also at the same time can open up a ton of new opportunities and capabilities once you build a solution that is low cost enough, and then you have an advisor or somebody who can you can riff with and say, "Hey, can you also do X, Y, and Z?"
Well, it's like Accenture, but at the micro level, in some
That's
weird
a
way,
great analogy.
you
It
know?
I,
it really is.
I would also say, I mean, so this goes back. It's funny. I used to have this kind of heuristic around building a product, which was if somebody goes through the trouble to build a very well formatted spreadsheet with automation in it, then there's a product opportunity. Like if somebody takes the time to make it pretty and add automations, it's a big enough business problem that you could probably build a successful app around it. So I think that some version of that sort of still stands here, but here's where things get interesting, which is Claude Cowork, actually now fills this gap where those same people who are thinking, you know what, maybe I'll create a spreadsheet here with some automation to solve this business problem I have, actually can do it without coding and without Claude Code by using Cowork. So that's where things get interesting and disruptive, as it pertains to the small businesses and how they leverage AI for coding. So I think what might happen is they actually don't leverage it for coding. They actually don't create bespoke apps at the very small business level to solve the problem of the mechanic shop. Instead, what they do is they find Cowork and they say, you know what, I don't need to buy this mechanic shop app to do my mechanics calculations anymore, because I can actually just do it in Cowork. So it's sort of this in-between place where you can solve the business problem that you need to solve without building code yourself or without buying a really niche SaaS product that serves your very narrow industry needs. Like I think that that's the disruption in the small business area.
or there's some version of the niche SaaS 2.0 that is with AI. I met with a guy who runs an agency that's only for appliance repair people. It's all he handles. He does marketing and other stuff for them. And it's gone from the agency's gone from like, 5 or 6 people a couple years ago down to 2, and he's using all the Claude tools to deliver all kinds of stuff. And so you have these people who might build a very specialized thing using Claude Cowork for the auto repair people, but it's cheaper and lighter weight than the traditional SaaS product, and it's just like, here it is, it's much cheaper. You just log in here, and it looks like SaaS in a certain way, but it's just you can spin it up very quickly and add to it, and it's a very lightweight thing. I don't know. That to me seems like a go to market for a lot of folks that are enterprising.
It's very compelling. John, I love the heuristic that you mentioned. Another heuristic, just at a very simple level, is if you find yourself or your team doing things 5 times or more,
Yeah.
then just build some automation around it.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? These bespoke little patches, they don't have to be full-blown products. They can be just, an automation around a motion that's in your business. And Cloud Work is a great use case for that. So the difference, just for anybody who's listening, so, we're talking about Cloud Code, Cloud Work, well, all these things. What are these things? So Cloud Work think of it as like your own personal assistant at work, right? Where you can connect your Gmail to it, or your calendar, or any kind of Google Sheets or what have you. You can connect Canva, a number of these different apps to it. And as you're doing things, you can just tell it, once those systems are connected, that you just want it to do it for you again and again. Here's what I'm doing. Create a summary. Again, going back to this product requirements document, what I find to be helpful is if you tell it, this is what I'm doing, I find myself doing this again and again, provide me with a solution that will make it so that I don't have to do this again and again. What would you suggest? Ask me questions. I always say ask me questions, because then it'll ask you questions back to say, do you want it like this, or like that, or like this? Then you can flesh out the idea and then go, okay, great. Now turn that into a replicable process for me. And it'll just do it. And you can prompt it to say, do that thing again, and it'll just roll. So that's Claude Work as an example of things that you can do there. Claude Code, on the other hand, is where it actually spins up code and creates end products for you. And you do a similar kind of process where you chat with it, but the output is a little bit different. It creates code, and it creates connections to other systems. You can do things via API, for example, or we've talked about MCP, Modal Context Protocol. So these are AI systems talking to other AI systems, and they figure out how the data exchanges. You don't have to do any of that stuff. So really powerful tools, but just to level set what those things are, I think sometimes it's
Yeah.
helpful to break that out.
Yeah, and by the way, under the hood, they're running the same kind of core engines, and in fact, like I think this is probably true. That the founder story of Claude Cowork is that they actually saw a lot of people using Claude Code to just do arbitrary things on their own computers, not to technically code, but to say things like, "Hey, can you go, find all my receipts from last year and add them to an Excel file?" And Claude Code is perfectly capable of doing that. And so by observing that was a use case that was kind of, emerging out in the wild, they're like, well, heck, let's just make this a more user-friendly experience for people who don't want to go into the terminal and type their stuff directly, but have an app to moderate it. And, and they continue to build that out. And then to your point, Andy, this is now what's emerging here is really Claude's answer to OpenClaw, which we have talked about before, the personalized agent. As predicted, Claude Cowork is slowly but surely eroding the distinctions between what it can do and what OpenClaw is capable of doing. Just in the last 2 weeks, they've added interactions with Claude Cowork via other channels like Telegram, like Slack. They created this thing called Dispatch that allows you to access your Claude Code instance, your Claude Cowork instance that's on your computer from your phone, from anywhere. So they're basically doing the OpenClaw agent thing and doing it the right way with all this sort of security things, and just it's this slow, steady march that frankly is unstoppable. Like OpenClaw,
Yeah, but you talk about it being slow, but it's really not slow at all. I mean, that
well, yeah,
this
yeah. You know what? By the way, on that note,
Slow
can I
city sprint.
I was talking to this buddy of mine who's got a software thing he's built, and he's using Claude Code, and I was like, well, are you on the most recent version? And he's like, well, let me check. And so he says, no, it looks like I last updated about 2 months ago, so I am 60 versions behind. Like,
Wow.
so
Oh my God.
there was an average of one release per day and actually, sure enough, every time I show up and I see Claude Desktop, every morning it says install the new, install the new, install the
Yeah.
new. It's
Yeah.
almost impossible to keep up with.
Pretty wild. Pretty wild. Well, let's keep moving on here. So on this note, Anthropic has throttled Claude as demand for ChatGPT rival surges. So, ChatGPT had a big backlash with the government contracts that happened a few weeks ago. There was this big backlash against Anthropic because they wouldn't agree to certain terms of what the Department of War wanted to have them.
anonymous killing and mass surveillance of domestic surveillance. So they drew some ethical red lines, and the government got mad at them, and it really boosted them.
And by the way, a
They,
judge just struck that down in the last 24
yeah,
hours.
yeah.
Fascinating.
But
Yeah.
that
So
ethical stand really propelled them. Yeah, go
yeah.
ahead, Andy.
Yeah, no, it's great, and as a result, they've had to create rate limits, which coincidentally we were just laughing about before we started the recording. But last night, as I was working on a little Skunkworks project of my own, I got put in the penalty box and said, "Okay, you're rate limited right now, even though I'm a paying customer. You're rate limited, and you can pick up the session in 3 hours." And I had to go do something else for 3 hours until I could.
You're like, Andy, this is no longer healthy.
Yeah,
Like,
I got put in the penalty box. I was like, I don't understand. What do I need to do to unlock
Well,
this?
you can go up to the next level or whatever it is, whatever
there
that
isn't a
is.
next level after the 200 though.
Are you paying 200? Are you already
No,
there?
no, but it did want me to pay another $100 to either level up, or I could pay on a per query basis, which
Yeah.
just all of that sounded like noise. So,
Well, by the way, just on that, like, what's interesting about that, they've calculated that the actual output that you get for your $200 a month Claude Pro Max thing, if you were to pay their API rates on, is something crazy like $6,000 a month. So the underpricing that they deliver at that Pro Max level is really extraordinary. And is it under cost? It seems like it might be.
yeah, I just like the Pro Max term, Pro Max Plus.
Pro Max
Max.
Platinum Ultra Double Diamond,
Right.
whatever.
Yeah.
Mega. Yeah.
Super
Hilarious.
ultra.
Super ultra, exactly. All right, so this week, ChatGPT drops Sora, big, shake up in the space. A lot of video generation apps, companies like FreePic and a number of others that pull in the Sora API are now having to scramble to figure out how to make their future without Sora plugged in. But so now Sora is shutting down. That means that Disney's OpenAI investment for $1 billion is now also shuttered with that. To the average person, that sounds like, wow, how could they walk away from $1 billion? But Greg, you want to talk a little bit about what's going on here?
Yeah, there's a ton of stuff going on with OpenAI. The Sora thing was very interesting because they made a big deal about this for months and months and months, and then they rolled it out, and I downloaded the app, and it was quite extraordinary to see all the stuff that people were making, at a very high level of realism in many cases. But there was a ton of copyright infringement going on, and a ton of like taking historical figures and making them look really stupid and foolish and putting all kinds of offensive things in their mouth. And, that was a problem. And then over time, I think the novelty wore off for a bunch of people and they saw a declining engagement with it. Um, but so that's one thing. And then they also announced this week that they got $120 billion, to your point about the giving up $1 billion from Disney. They got $120 billion funding round, which is, I believe, the largest ever by probably by an order of magnitude, but I don't know. It was not that long ago, a year ago or a year and a half ago, where people were announcing like $1 billion rounds for the first time, and that was astonishing. It's like they've got a couple of billion or 6 billion, or I think the XAI was 10 billion, and these were just astronomical amounts of money compared to what historically taken place. And now we're at 120 billion. And it's now kind of meaningless. I saw that and I thought, oh, that's a lot of money. But I mean, it's just crazy, and it seems to reflect a very, very high degree of investor confidence in OpenAI, obviously. But the shutting down of Sora and the recent abandonment of their instant checkout e-commerce kind of uh, strategy, those things are kind of concerning, and I think that they're under pressure and they're trying to sort of refocus on things that are gonna kind of where the momentum and where the revenue is gonna be, like in the enterprise, um, and, to some degree, their existing consumer business.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we were talking about this before the show. Like, let's be clear. That's a tenth of a trillion. That's 0.1 trillion
Right.
as the number, which again just starts to sound fantastical. And it does make you wonder. I mean, I don't know how, as a financial analyst evaluating a deal like this, you model out the expectations on revenue to make
How
sense
ca
of it.
how can you? How can
Yeah,
you?
I honestly think that a lot of it is being driven by the assumption of near infinite upside, right? So like there is, I mean, if you believe the techno utopians, AI utopians, right? Like this could be the last technology that we ever create. And that would be because it unlocks this upside that really captures everything.
Right. Well, to some degree, it's gotta be kinda hive mind behavior. We wanna be a part of that because this other one is a part of that. The sort of uh
Well, the backdrop on this also is that, they're gearing up to go public, right? So
Right.
right now, after that round, their valuation is between 840 to $850 billion in valuation. So that means that, what they're banking on is when they do go public, that it'll be well north of that, and that they'll be right up there with Google, Microsoft, NVIDIA, and others. The question is, will they have the revenue to sustain that?
No. The
And
the
so
the the
that is the
answer is
big
no.
issue. It won't. It won't. And so that's the double-edged sword in this whole funding round, is that they took on the money. They have this massive valuation right now. They don't have the revenue to support it. Doesn't even compare to what Google is generating, or Microsoft, or I mean, those are mature companies. OpenAI has been effectively commercial for the past 5 years or so. So you need a lot of time to be able to mature that market, even if they did generate $100 million run rate with their ad service in the past
Right.
couple of
I was
months.
just gonna
You
mention that is
you
that's
really
that's a
need
pretty good number.
it's a great number. It's amazing. I mean, as a standalone number, it's incredible. But when you stand it up against these trillion-dollar valuation businesses that have been mature for quite some time, you really need to have enough time to be able to mature that business. And so John, to your point about having this be, sort of like uh, open-ended value, like where does this go? I mean, of course, all of those companies know what their future plans are. There's a hardware play that's coming, that will likely, be disruptive to Apple, is what they're imagining. Certainly, software and enterprise is a big part of it. Advertising is another part of it. So much in the same way that Google has multiple lines of business, OpenAI will also have those lines of business. But then the big but in all of this is it's going to take a long time for those products to come to market and then for that revenue to mature.
They sort of got very distracted by all these side projects. Sora was one of those. And I think that they had this kind of complacency for a while. We're the leader. We can go off and do these things, and our position in the market is pretty stable and assured. And they were going to create this social network and then potentially monetize that. And they had this e-commerce play with instant checkout, and that was going to be another revenue stream. They would have ads, and they would have consumer subscriptions, and then their enterprise revenue. And that, on paper, that looked pretty good, but they pulled back from a lot of those things. And I'm not even convinced that the hardware is going to come out in the with the same ambition. That, at least, I mean, maybe they're sort of far along enough with this initial product that it'll come out. But if it's not an immediate hit, I could imagine they would retreat from that pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, baked into the assumptions, it does feel like there is some magical thinking. I think, we're talking about all the expected or possible on the table revenue streams, and they would have to absolutely crush on all of them to justify, current valuations with, the baked in risk of those things not happening. And so if you want to justify like this kind of valuation, you have to be thinking that that's all going to happen, and that there's a whole bunch of revenue streams we haven't even figured out. Like, again, magical thinking kind of thing here. I keep hearing echoing in my head, this time it's different, which is the constant sort of thing of all technology, entrepreneurs and investors. The only funny thing about this one to me is I wonder if it isn't actually different this time. Like this whole idea of, the last technology we will ever build. Like that's a reasonable idea to at least consider. It might be a 5% chance, but it's not zero. And every other technology up to this point has been, a zero. So that's the only reason that I look at this and go, well, geez, maybe like there is some sense in which you could make the case, like, if we're not in on this, we're missing out on the rest of humanity. Like, we're missing out on what happens from here on out.
I would frame it instead as instead of the last technology, I would frame it as a technology that has almost infinite applications to every conceivable field. And I
Yeah,
think that that's really true. The question is, does ChatGPT capture that value, or do other people, right? The
right.
technology, I think, is profound, but who's going to get the money, right? That's the real question.
Yeah.
And also, when you go public, you have a level of transparency that you need to share with the public as investors. And so, do they want to be able to, do they want to have to share that information? Because the revenue is not going to be mature enough to substantiate $1 trillion enterprise value business, which it'll have to be if it goes public. They're talking about taking it public this year. So, time's ticking. They got to mature a lot of revenue very, very quickly in order to substantiate any
Or
of that.
or at least show a trajectory that gives investors confidence that the future is bright. I mean, that's what most of these stocks are about these days, is anticipated future growth, right? Even companies like Google or Apple that are generating tons and tons of revenue and paying dividends in some cases. It's all still about the future and what's the
To a
market and what's
point,
the market.
but then then you look at Nvidia, who's crushing numbers every quarter, and every time they go crush a number, their stock goes down.
Which may be like people thinking, okay, we've reached the peak, or they can't go bigger than this. It's
Right.
sort of pessimism.
Exactly. And then, with that demand comes fulfillment. So there are new expenses, and that's why the numbers go down for NVIDIA. But it'll be really interesting to see what happens with OpenAI and then them going public in this kind of environment, because they're going to need to be able to substantiate those numbers quarter after quarter. And if they're not holding that up, they're going to see a lot of pain.
And investors will force discipline on them eventually. If they're not doing what they think should be done, investors will force them to make different choices.
Yes. Well, let's maybe leave it at that for today. This is a great conversation. Covered a lot of really interesting topics. So thanks, guys, for the talk today, and thanks anybody who's listening. Appreciate it. Please tell your friends, share, like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.
All right.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye, y'all.